Blueprints for a stranger, asterisk the note that didn't belong. Orignal sang in registers. Tolan could chart with her bones. At dawn, the crystal plains held a tea-colored hum that soaked into her ankles. By noon, sun-heated updrafts combed the dune ridges, teasing a bright treble off every facet. Storms were percussion hail on fluted rock, thunder rebounding through subsurface vaults deeper than it went in. The planet's score was never the same twice, but it was always itself, so she heard the wound the instant it opened. A shriek tore the sky from high note to gravel, shearing straight through the familiar scale. Sand stiffened under Tolan's feet. Overhanging glass ledges shed teardrops that chimed as they fell. Even the wind sidestepped. She was standing above the listening lagoon, head cocked, mouth shut to save her voice, when a streak of fire clawed the southern horizon. Not a meteor. Meteors died politely over the far range. This thing fought, shedding plates, painting the light violet and ash until it vanished behind the third ridge. The impact came a breath later, a pressure punch that made her teeth ache, then a natural quiet, not rest. Held breath, Tolan ran. She chose slabs that would take her weight. Skirted deceitful glitter where the microcrystals flowed like water. Let the plains read her intent through her soles. Orignal preferred those who listened. It made a path. The trench was easy to find, a gouge of fused mirror sand, glass curled up like frozen surf. The craft lay at the far end like a split seed, one side peeled back, internal ribs, exposed foam, wire, fabric, all wrong here. Heat pulsed in curt waves. The wind prowled the edges, irritated and wary. Tlen slid down the hardened slope, tapping puddled glass to judge where it would crack before it cut. The wreck smelled of cooked solvent and resin. A low orange emergency glow held the interior like dying coals. Straps hung, panels drooped, and under it all, beneath the tick of cooling metal, a rhythm, rough, uneven, alive. She shouldered a bent locker aside. It had settled its mass and didn't want to move. Tolan set one hand to the deck, one to the locker, and let a bone-deep note slip through her cartilage. The sound found the locker's ring and leaned. Metal sulked, loosened, hopped the breadth of 2 fingers. Another push and the pinned arm came free. He lay blinking up at her opaque skin, grey eyes that swallowed light instead of giving it back. Smaller than she'd imagined humans, denser, wrapped in torn fabric, stamped with a white patch she couldn't read. His face practiced a sequence fear, calculation. Embarrassment, then coughed wetly. "You are broken," Tolan said, keeping her voice low and flat so she wouldn't crack whatever held him together. "You're glowing," he rasped. "Yes," she said. "You are." Loud, she offered an elbow. He took it. His knees considered a mutiny, then relented. "Outside," he managed. "Outside is sharp," she said, but helped him anyway, testing each foothold back through the torn hull into the trench's open throat. The wind nosed them, relieved to have a path. He braced on the glossy lip and took 3 deliberate breaths. The coughs that followed sounded like broken glass sliding into a bucket. When he straightened, his mouth tried on a smile and found it still fit. "Not dead," he said. "Inconveniently alive," Tolan agreed. He laughed once short. Surprised, and the trench walls caught the sound, passed it along. "Marcus Hale," he said. "Systems Tolan, listener." She eyed the plume of smoke thinning downwind. "Your falling note upset the plane." "Beacon went stupid," he said, guilt bleeding through the engineer's report. skipped our insertion. Gravity had opinions. They do, she said. The ground under her feet still murmured a complaint. We will make walls, walls. He blinked like a hatchling. You mean shelter? Yes. Walls are how you keep the air from moving you. He considered that, then nodded as if she'd translated a proverb. Okay. Power first if we can, then walls. Power buys time. Time buys thinking. Thinking buys not dying. Walls buy quiet, Tolan said. Quiet buys listening. We're going to get along, he said, and swayed. She caught him again, let him lean until the vertigo passed. Up close, she could feel heat bleeding off him in tired waves, pain. She asked. Enough, he said, with the fatalism of a person counting what still worked. He pointed into the wreck. If a panel survived, I can drink both your sons. She went to look. The heat had dropped to the kind that made tools sticky. She found a collapsible solar mat wedged under a spar, a coil of flex wire, a soft bag labelled in blocky letters, and a roll of stubborn paper printed with rectangles and measures human songs with corners. She brought them out and set the panel where the trench lip caught the light of the warmer sun and the harsher one together. The mat drank like a greedy beast. She sang a small cradle out of mirror sand to hold the coil. When she turned, Marcus had his hands braced on his knees, watching the panel as if he could will it to fill. The tension in his shoulders eased by a notch. His hands, she noticed, were blunt and careful. Tools that had learned not to slip. Do you always make flat floors first? He asked, recovering humor in little bites. Yes, Tolan said. You cannot bring a human quiet until you have stopped the ground moving beneath him. Words to live by, he said, or not die by. She dropped into the raw bed of the trench. Stand there. Not on the lines. What lines? He began, and then the sand started to move. She sang with her mouth closed, half through sternum, half through palate, dragging a rectangle out of the dune. The top layer sloughed, fused, glittered as it gave up being curved. Heat bled off with a faint fog. When she lifted her hand, a glassy slab lay where churned sand had been, edges true. Corners raised a fingertip to keep storms from licking in. Marcus exhaled, a human word she didn't know but filed under approval. That is witchcraft. Practice, Tolan said. She tapped the slab. It rang honest. Put your panel on the corner. The planes remember the sun there. He propped it, fussed the angle until his mouth untightened. The wind, appeased by geometry, adjusted its route around the trench with only a little complaint. The screaming note in the air had gone. Its afterimage would take longer to fade. We will ask the ground for walls tomorrow, Tolan said. Today we teach it, you are staying. He sat on the slab's edge, boots dangling. I don't know for how long. No one knows, she said. That is not the same as refusing to learn. He unrolled the paper and muttered to himself about beams and loads and right angles that won't shame me. She listened, curious despite herself, while the planets settled. Boxes, it seemed, had their uses. Even Orindis could admit that. Asterisk. They woke to a wind with opinions. Marcus had slept in the shadow of the wreck, wrapped in a foiled blanket that whispered when he moved. Tolan had leaned against the trench wall with her eyes closed and her inner ear open, listening to the plane test their slab with little exploratory licks. It had accepted the flatness grudgingly. Progress, food. Marcus asked, sitting up, hair behaving like a plant under drought. Not from here, Tolan said. She handed him a protein brick excavated from the soft bag. He grimaced, chewed, recovered. Coffee, he ventured. Define, Tolan said. Brown, he said. Hot, makes the world forgive you. We do not have forgiveness, she said, then added, we have heated tiles. Close enough, he said, and laughed when the slab warmed under his palms. She had tuned that edge to pull noon's heat forward for the morning. He approved with a groan that read as praise. They worked with the second sun not far off the horizon. When the dunes cast long blue and the wind's bite softened, Tolan walked the slab, singing test notes at handspan intervals to map where the ground would let a wall root. Marcus scratched lines on his paper and then on the glass with a bit of soft stone, marking corners and spans as if numbers could hold up a sky. Corners tell you where you stop and the world starts, he said, preempting the argument. You must be told, Tolan asked. Every morning, he said, and smiled like a bruise starting to admit it will heal. They compromised his favorite sport, she discovered. He got a right-angled inner room he called core, where he could bolt things to things without the universe complaining. She wrapped it in a curved shell he called your ocean, where the wind could flow without snarling. He explained load paths with his hands. She hummed bending nodes into the glass until he could feel where a wall wanted to be. By noon, the inner box had 3 sides. At dusk, she pulled a lattice over both shapes of roof that bent storms instead of fighting them. Marcus braced it with a salvaged spar because he trusted things that could be counted. She tuned the lattice to hum when struck by grit so they would hear a squall coming. When the wind rose for evening practice, the roof answered with music instead of complaint. Probably the first singing house in human history. Marcus said, lying on the slab with his hands linked behind his head. The first quiet one in hours, Tolan said. They were still listening when the wardens came. 3 figures in plates of black glass walked the ridge with the assurance of those who could see their own echoes. Their voices braided when they spoke, a chorus that made sand skitter you fix. A loudness by anchoring a foreigner, the center warden said. Not a question. I fix quiet, Tolan answered. The foreigner is loud without shelter. Wardens circled the structure, tapping fault lines that weren't there. Nomads do not anchor, Lep said. Nomads reposition, Wright corrected. Anchor is an accusation. It is a ring, Tolan said, and gestured to her curved shell. Soft, useful. They took in the inner box with equal disapproval. This corner, Center said, as if naming a disease, is a tool, Tolan said. He needs edges to know where he stops. The 3 clicked together for a private chord that meant narrow toleration. Do not grow this into a city, Center said. What is city? Tolan asked. A mistake repeated, Left said. An invitation answered, Right countered, and earned a glance. Marcus stood with his hands visible. I'm not a threat. You are gravity where there should be wind, Center said without looking at him. We will observe. They left rods of obsidian in the sand around the slabber hoop of authority. It wasn't a cage, exactly. It was a conversation with teeth. Friendly, Marcus said, when they were smaller on the ridge. They are careful, Tolan said. Careful is loud. It took 3 more days to finish walls to Marcus's standard. In that time, the planet sent tests. A noon squall that arrived early and hit sideways, the lattice bent and sang, pleased with itself. A night glacial, attracted by the wreck's residual heat. Tolan vitrified a ring of sand beneath it with a single high nail tone, while Marcus discouraged it with a shock spear he'd conjured from a capacitor and a broken strut. And because the universe adores Far's a nest of balloon mites that chose the inner corner as their new ancestral home until Marcus negotiated a relocation with a broom and a lecture on boundaries. They were eating a meal that tasted like salt and fuel, comparing notes on the day's harmonics, when an engine note slid under the windslick, practiced, predatory. A skimmer dropped toward the trench, its hull painted with traveling glyphs. Traders. The Orindiri tolerated them the way planes tolerated feet, briefly and without affection. A woman in woven wire stepped off the skimmer with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We heard you built a house," she said, admiring everything but Tolan. Her attention snagged on Marcus and held. "We buy curiosities." "Not for sale," Tolan said. "Everything sings a price." "Not this," Tolan said, and eased a hand onto the slab, letting the house feel her calm. The woman's smile sharpened. "We could bring tools, filters, food, a beacon that doesn't go stupid." Marcus stood, empty hands open. "We're fine." "You're a fallen thing," the woman said, eyes never leaving him. "Fallen things need owners." The wind outside the shell took a hard breath. Tolan did not raise her voice. "Leave a different song," or the leader's companions shifted. Their knives were glass. Their knives sang. "Or we teach you to hear," Tolan said, and placed both hands on the slab. The house answered before she finished the chord. The roof's lattice shivered, harmonics colliding into a pressure the ears registered as thunder without a source. Knife edges quivered, then spider cracked as the vibration found their weakness. One shattered like a dropped icicle. Marcus didn't. Wait, he stepped and struck, stunning the nearest with the flat of his improvised spear. The skimmer crew reeled under a hail they couldn't see, then cut their losses and fled, trailing angry promises that sounded like bankruptcy sung off-key after. Tolan sat with her hands across her throat, singing at that force scraped you raw. "You okay?" Marcus asked, breath high. "Yes," she said, and found her voice grainy. "Do not get sold again. I didn't the first time. You would have if I was slower. Then I'll be faster. Be quieter," she said. And the laugh he couldn't hold back put a better note in the shell than any chord she knew. The wardens returned with elders whose voices moved boulders. They listened to the house. They listened to the wind. They listened to the line of crushed glass where the skimmer had landed. "You are making a city," an elder said finally. "I am making silence for one," Tolan replied. "Silence spreads." Another warned, "Then let it carry good notes." Tolan said, "In the end the elders deepened the obsidian hoop and named it the Ring of Learning." Tolan could build within. Beyond would demand argument. "Fair, for now. What next?" Marcus asked, later, rolling a measuring tape between his palms. "Garden," Tolan said, and saw him register the word with skepticism and then hope. "You insist on eating." "Frequently," he admitted. She sang moisture from deep seams and coaxed it through capillaries in the slab to shallow basins the wind couldn't steal from. Marcus found seeds in a sealed packet in his soft bag and pressed them into damp glass like someone daring a miracle to take a breath. The first sprout looked like a surprised star. He crouched, reverent. "Look at that. Salad." A warden stood at the ring and did not step in. "We have no word for garden." "You will," Tolan said, and tuned the lattice lower so the sprout would sleep. The day the rescue beacon pierced the local hum, Marcus went very still. He had been calibrating a panel that didn't need calibrating. Now he set the tool down and let his hands be hands. "They found me," he said, equal parts relief and apology. Bright band sings loud, Tolan said. A human shuttle would come, crisp insignia and crisp questions. You will go, she added, free of drama. I'll come back, he said, as if daring time to contradict him. She looked at the ring, at the rods, at the garden and the eel glass and the roof that bent lightning. Even if you do not, the listening will. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? Shapes sing, she said. This one knows your name. The shuttle's dust hadn't settled before the commander started asking for Marcus passed over a pared-down package enough to keep outposts standing, not enough to hollow Orignal. The commander had the good sense to accept the boundary. Before he climbed the ramp, Marcus put a hand on the inner corner. You were right, he said. Boxers help us know where we stop, and curves help you know you didn't end, Tolan said. He laughed, that kettle sound, eager and reluctant in the same breath. Don't let the wardens scare you. They are loud, she said. I will teach them to hum. And the traders? She glanced at the ring of crushed glass, and then at the roof. The house remembers their knives. He saluted without mocking it. See you soon. When the shuttle rose, the planes hummed with its wake. The house held the note and softened it, as if insisting that absence to could be tuned. Talon walked the perimeter, palms to the wall, feeling where heat collected and where the wind sought to pry. She adjusted small things angle here, a seam there until the structure sighed into itself like a creature learning to sleep. Night came, as it always did, from every direction at once. The roof sang the stars quiet, the garden exhaled green. The ring of rods made a circle that felt less like a fence and more like a frame. Tomorrow she would step to the ring's edge and ask the elders to walk with her beyond it. The ridge folk needed a windbreak. The dune people wanted a moving, sleeping hollow that turned with the sun. The wardens would argue, and the arguing would make better walls. For now, the notes that hadn't belonged had learned a harmony. The ground under the slab had stopped complaining. The wind took the path they'd given it and approved. Tlen sat with her back to the box and her face to the curve, eyes closed, inner ear open. The house hummed the day back to her. Crash, breath, slab, lattice, eel, knives, ring, sprout, promise. A human had fallen out of the sky and left a shape. Shapes lasted. That was the human trick. She decided, not conquest or clever theft, but the compulsion to put meaning where there had been only weather. She sang a thank you into the slab. The slab answered. The chapter ended the way the planet preferred, in a chord that promised the next.